You're listening to Searching for More, a podcast of the Diocese of Arlington. On this episode, Jeanne Mancini, president of the March for Life, talks about this year's march themed Life Empowers, Pro-Life is Pro-Woman, in honor of the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage.
We wanted to present clarity about what it means to be pro-woman in a year that will particularly bring a lot of divisive and confusing messages about what it means to be a woman and to be pro-woman.
Hear Jeanne talk about the impact of the March for Life and why and how to get involved. This episode's host is Billy Atwell, Chief Communications Officer of the Diocese.
Jeanne, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you took over as the president of March for Life in 2012, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
What has that been like?
Well, every year has been so unique, to tell you the truth. And really like any sort of response to a call from God, there are moments that are so beautiful and that just sort of blow your mind. You just know that He's at work, that you're a humble instrument. And then there are some moments of, heavy obstacles and you have to kind of really pray your way through them. So, but by and large, it's just been such an honor. And a tremendous gift. I've met many amazing people. And
you're really on the front lines with the March for Life of like the battle of good and evil. You're, like the warrior mentality has to kind of be alive to champion these kinds of issues in such an aggressive environment. It's obviously, when you're dealing with like tools of the devil and so on, but you're also dealing with political elements of it too, which I would imagine create a lot of kind of stress. Growing up, were you raised in a household that was really devout and that kind of prepared you for this? Is this something that you more grew into as time went on?
Well, I was raised in the Diocese of Arlington, and
so you were well equipped, and you had everything you needed.
yes, and no, not at all. So my mom and dad, who were very faithful parishioners at Good Shepherd Catholic Church, they did form us well, and we went to the March for Life when I was young, etc. But my brothers and sisters do not see eye to eye with me. Not all of my brothers and sisters don't see eye to eye with me on this issue. But yes, in a way, my family has been the training ground for a lot of what I do because I've had to learn to agree to disagree with respect and how to thoughtfully push back. And I'm not very good at that, but I think it's really been the training ground for the work that I do, especially with media, et cetera. Like when you go on, media outlets that aren't necessarily friendly, I'm like, these are my siblings, that I'm talking to. So
it's important not to live in an echo chamber. It's not good for evangelization. It's not good also for gaining the access you need to folks who can actually help move the needle on the issues of abortion and similar issues.
Yes, absolutely. And also it's so easy for us to demonize the people that are on the other side. And because I love my siblings so deeply and I pray so much, for their conversion of heart on these issues, it helps me to just understand where people are coming from on the other side. So often they just haven't had the same formation, or they've had some life experience that has made them sort of have this particular, feeling about abortion. And it's important that we see the person behind the issue and treat them with love.
Yeah, absolutely. This year's March, the year that we're recording this, it's the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage movement. Talk a little bit about why that was decided to be highlighted. I'm sure you have lots of options for themes, but why did you go down that road?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking that question, Billy, because it's one of the things that I love the most about the March. So a little bit of background, 30,000-foot view. So every year since I've been working with the March for Life, we've chosen a theme for the March. And we do that because, every year there's pressing needs, like the most sort of cutting edge, most time-sensitive needs in building a culture of life. And there are different things that are happening either because of something culturally, a story that's hit in the previous year, or a law, that's before us, et cetera. So I say that, by way of, we've chosen themes, for example, on adoption, a noble decision in the past, which to show how noble and beautiful it is for a woman to choose to be a birth mother instead of choosing abortion. So we've had themes like that. So this year, our theme is pro-life is pro-woman, and it's life empowers. Pro-life is pro-woman, and that is because the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which gave women in the United States the right to vote, will be celebrated this year in August in 2020. So we wanted to do a few things. We wanted to present clarity about what it means to be pro-woman in a year that will particularly bring a lot of divisive and confusing messages about what it means to be a woman and to be pro-woman. So that's one thing. And then we also wanted to return to the history, to the early suffragists, because hands down, every single one of them was pro-life. But when you hear today about some of the feminist kind of inklings and you hear about the history, you'd never have the understanding that those early suffragists understood that to be pro-woman had, that didn't have a negative impact on the child. They saw that being a mother was a gift and that having a child was a miracle, and they embraced that.
How do you see, whether it's the church or just culture, kind of take back what it means to be a feminist and to hold up femininity, because it has been twisted so badly?
It has. Well, let's remember that the church, even with everything that we've seen in the past few years, which has been so discouraging, that the church is the expert in humanity. And as Catholics, we've been given such an incredible anthropology in terms of what it means to be male and what it means to be female. And that anthropology provides clarity into the massive confusion happening in our culture today. So what does the church teach? Oh, it's so rich. The church's teachings on women are so rich. I mean, we know St. John Paul II wrote more about women than I think any other particular topic in his pontificate. Maybe. I mean, there were a lot of topics he wrote about. Maybe that's a stretch, but he wrote a heck of a lot about women.
It's
it was
a
pretty
significant
remarkable.
volume, right?
But at the end of the day, the church teaches that women and men are intrinsically equal in dignity, but different. So we're equal in dignity, but we're inherently different, and we're different in a way that complements each other. And that, basic truth about what it means to be a person has been challenged, in recent years in our culture. But as Catholics, we have such a rich anthropology, and we need to remember and return to the fact that the church is the expert in anthropology and in humanity.
What is the best way for the church to communicate some of that, though? Because I think for people who aren't Catholic, or people who are maybe hostile to the church and dealing with, the crises that the church has gone through in recent years, the fact that most of our leaders are men, they're clergy, so they're, inherently men. Does that make it harder? Does it just create more onus on women to step up and to champion that teaching? What would you recommend, or what do you think on that?
Well, there's so much misunderstanding around the church's teachings on a male priesthood. And so, I mean, even just, you guys do so much with the diocese. And every time I, open an email from the diocese or look at the website, I'm blown away by the amount of teaching and the, theology on tap and the retreats and all these different things. So first of all, kudos, because I think you're forming our people in such a beautiful way. And sometimes you don't really see that. You don't see, the fruits of that. But, a talk even on why an all-male priesthood, maybe that would be a good idea, even in this moment. Wow, that's kind of courageous given all of the, sensitivities right now. But we're not going to back away from the truth about what the church teaches. So if you have one of the wonderful, teachers in the diocese talk a little bit about that, maybe have a woman also present along with it. I mean, there's just such richness in the church's teachings. And again, more than any other religion, we have upheld women and the inherent dignity of women, and even marriage. I mean, there's so much there. And I think because it's been such a sad time in our culture, in the church in the last few years, we've kind of taken one for the team, and we've been a little bit beat up as the church, but we can't back down from the fact that Christ has presented the truth, and we've got teaching authority, and we need to really be strong and joyful about that. The other part of that is for lay people who are listening, and most of us are lay people, and we've got our biggest job is to live our vocation well, to live it elegantly, to live it with joy. And so when we show the joy, in being married and in being a woman in the church, I don't think I'm deprived of something because I can't be a priest, but showing all the different ways that I've been able to get ahead, that's part of it. So it's just leading by example and with joy.
Yeah. You talk about the influence of the Catholic Church on this movement because of the teaching. The March for Life is so heavily Catholic. When you go, there's St. Cecilia's parish banners from Boise, right, Idaho, and you get all these different Catholic churches. How have you seen the church's influence on the march develop over time? And are we seeing maybe a falling off of other denominations or religions or whatever, or is it just a kind of a dominance in just by number of Catholic representation?
Yeah. So first of all, interestingly, the March for Life is non-sectarian, so we're not inherently Catholic. But early on, Nellie Gray, who was the founder of the March for Life and a devout Catholic, sent letters to bishops telling them about the March for Life. And because it's such a central part of our Catholic social teachings to stand up for human rights and to stand up for the unborn, Catholics responded en masse. I mean, and Catholics are by and large the backbone of the March for Life. There's no question about it. In fact, since I've been working at the March, one of our biggest challenges has been getting evangelicals and other religions to come and be really involved in the March. Because the Catholics are always going to come. Like, we don't even need to. The grassroots outreach is so natural to the Catholics, we don't really have to stir it up very much because they're all coming and they've got the March for Life on their calendars, they've got it in their church bulletins, etc. So I would say it's amazing. We hear from the pulpit, most of us hear from the pulpit, certainly in the Diocese of Arlington, we hear about this issue from the pulpit, and it's always so beautiful, but many evangelical denominations don't, and they certainly are not. They're certainly not encouraged in the way that we are as Catholics to embrace our role in the public square, to embrace our role in influencing the public square. As Catholics, we've been taught from an early age that it's so important that we, especially the laity, make our voice heard to influence what's happening in the culture and in the public square. And so I think that's one of the reasons that it's so Catholic. But as a Catholic, I'm just so profoundly grateful for that. I just think of all the beautiful events, including the ones from the Diocese of Arlington that surround the March for Life, and they're thousands and thousands of people come to them, and it's incredible. What a testimony to the truth. Yeah,
for those listening, Jeannie's talking about the Life is Very Good rally that happens, and we've been having it at Eagle Bank Arena, at least as of late, because of the numbers. I think it was 8,600 kids, if I remember correctly, for the night before the march. And then there's a mass that morning, and then we all go over. And I think the mass the next morning was something like 4,000 or 5,000 people. That's amazing. I asked Kevin Boley, our youth director, I said, are these mostly people from yesterday? And he said, no, actually, there's not a very large overlap.
Wow.
I was like, wow, so we easily had 10 or 11,000 people, like unique individuals that came through that building over that time, and it was amazing. And the Life is Very Good, the first time I went to it was after I started working for the diocese, and I was just stunned by, obviously there's an energy with young people that any parent knows to expect. What was really surprising was when the monstrance was processed around the building, the quiet. If you closed your eyes, you'd think you were the only one in the building. You wouldn't have known there was anyone else there. And there was a real interest, I think, in the solemn, as well as the bands and the music and the energy. But lines for confession were very long, and we couldn't get enough priests back there. And the quiet, it gave me a sense that there is something stirring amongst young people. What is your experience? Because when you go to the march, it's stunningly young. I always say, if I was working on the other side, that would be what haunts me, is this is such a young crowd every year. It's not a young crowd for 1 year and then they get older as time goes on. No, there's a new group of 9-year-olds and 12-year-olds and 18-year-olds and 16-year-olds every year. And that would be what haunts me. What is your thought about the influence of young people on the pro-life movement in general, in the march, and its impact on the march?
Great. Okay, well, first, let me just say, Billy, you're not alone. The other side does feel that way. There was this fantastic story that came out in Newsweek a few years ago. So the then head of NARAL Pro-Choice America, Nancy Keenan, I think was her name, had a meeting at lunchtime in D.C., one of the March for Life days. And she came out and she saw the massive crowd of young people, and she went back and decided that day or within the next few days to resign from her job because they were not recruiting young people like we are. Of course, what she didn't understand is that their product is flawed. It's not so much about our marketing techniques or recruiting, but it's the product.
There's not some secret
that's
scheme
inherently
here.
Flawed, right? So you ask, what the role of young people in the March for Life. St. John Paul II has a beautiful quote. I think it's in Evangelium Vitae, where he talks about young people are the best ambassadors for life. And I love that line because it's true. I mean, the enthusiasm of young people is so contagious, and it's It's so heartening to see them and so inspiring to see them at the March for Life every year. It's my favorite part, hands down, getting up on the stage and looking out and just seeing the massive crowd of young people and how, excited they are. And, it's a somber moment here. We're reflecting upon the loss of 60 million Americans to abortion. And yet I think young people really know that this is the human rights abuse of today, the civil rights abuse, and that their generation will bring an end to this. And they have such hope. They're not cynical. Those of us who've lived a little longer, we sort of lose hope about this. You know what I mean?
Been in the trenches for too long.
Right, exactly. But they are so hopeful. They are the pro-life generation, And so they've got a huge place in the March for Life. A big deal is that we always have schools lead the March for Life. This year, it's a school from the Diocese of Arlington, Oak Crest, leading the march. And that's in part because of our theme. So it's an all-girls school. And we'll also have a student from Oak Crest actually speaking at the March for Life. And hands down,
wonderful.
That's like always the most favorite speaker when we get our surveys back. People love the young people speaking. So they have a very important role. And one thing that I like to brag about, because it's just amazing, is there have been a handful of other marches in recent years, in recent months. And these, organizations have to bus in young people. They have to pay them. We never have ever done that. We don't pay for buses. We don't sort of pay off people to come for the march or anything like that.
There's no lunch stipend to show up.
Right. It's so organic. I mean, this is as grassroots as they get. And I think we're the youngest and largest annual march anywhere. It's really beautiful.
That is, yeah. And I think also young people, you always have to balance it that, when you're young, you can maybe be naive, but there's some wisdom to the initial perspective of a young person in that they're not overthinking it.
Right.
Right? There's
Simplicity.
There's a beauty to the simplicity of thought.
Yeah.
That, is it right or wrong to kill a baby in the womb?
Yeah.
They have a pretty easy answer for that. The question is, why do some adults take so long to get to that answer?
True.
Why do politicians have to dance around it so much?
Amen.
It can't be because they're truly comfortable with the answer. They know it's wrong, but there's other advantages for them in whatever way. But there's some beauty about hearing, a teenager. I feel like there's a sweet spot too in high school where like they're out of that age of naivete and they're truly owning it. And when they advocate for it, I feel like there is just such a beauty to that. And that gives me like hope and inspiration. My mom, we volunteered at crisis pregnancy center stuff. So I was kind of raised and dyed in this wool. But to see others coming up, I'm like, okay, great. Like there is a fresh generation ready to take the reins and ready to charge forward and carry the banner. It's really wonderful to see. What else have you seen change over the last 45 or so years of the March for Life? What has been some of the evolution that you think has been the most helpful maybe?
Well, broadly in terms of the culture, that's changed significantly over the last year. So in the direction of life, which is great. So if I can, I'll point out some of what we would call sort of the markers of building a culture of life. So one of the things is that whereas back in the 80s, abortion clinics were at their height. So I think the highest was ever around 800 abortion clinics in the country. I'm sorry, I take that back. It was more like 1,300. So many more. 1,300. Now we're down under 700 abortion clinics around the country. And then the opposite is the case with pregnancy care centers. So back in the late 70s, there were 600, 700 pregnancy care centers. Now there's well over 3,000 pregnancy care centers. And they provide collectively over $100 million in free resources to women and men facing an unexpected pregnancy every year. Another, and perhaps one of the most important aspects is just public opinion polling, which is it shows people's hearts and minds. So, at the March for Life, we work to change hearts and minds, not just the law. And of course, the law influences that, but we're working for the day when abortion is unthinkable. But we've seen people go from the height of being pro-choice, which was in the early 1990s, down today to many, many more people are pro-life, where it's kind of, depending on how you ask the question, it's about equal. But if you sift it out a little bit and say, do you think this kind of abortion is okay? Do you think this? 8 out of 10 Americans for over 10 years would limit abortion way more than it's limited in this country. They'd limit it at most to the first 3 months of pregnancy. And so we're seeing public opinion move in the direction of life as well, which is really interesting. The actual number of abortions has really significantly decreased. The height, again, was in the early 1990s. Now it's the lowest that it's ever been since the year Roe v. Wade happened, which was 1973. It's still way too high. It's still about 800,000, but we are moving in the right direction. So those are some signs. Also, young people, when you look at, for example, the General Social Survey, which is the government's basically database and longitudinal study on social change, young people are the cohort of people that have changed the most in the direction of life. So they're the most pro-life generation, which is exciting. So all of these things, I think, are really signs that we're moving in the direction of life.
Yeah, looking at it from when I was a kid, and I just remember what were the slogans and the things that I heard, and it was abortion stops a beating heart, and some of these very fundamental things about the reality of what abortion is. It didn't fill in the gaps of, well, what about that woman? What about that mother? I feel like that has also been a huge movement forward, is that the church, the culture, lots of pro-life organizations are providing more well-rounded service. So it's not just don't abort that baby and then, well, good luck.
Right.
We're there to walk with. Pope Francis's line of accompaniment. That is the word that maybe defines his pontificate. That accompaniment, the church, both Catholic and Protestant. There are plenty of groups out there that want to walk. When we opened the Mother Mercy Clinic in Manassas, for instance, we got as much positive feedback when a year later the ultrasound machine was put in and neonatal care could be offered as we did when we opened the clinic initially.
That's amazing.
And that was just one expanded service over maybe, 5, 10 or whatever it is that are offered as it is. So the question is why? Why was there such interest in that? Well, because people love the idea that we're not just encouraging these women to save that baby's life, but we'll help you feed that baby. We'll help you clothe that baby. If you need medical care during this pregnancy, we're there. We're going to help take care of you through this. And that's in addition to countless other services that happen throughout the diocese. But that one I just remembered thinking, it's like we've reopened another clinic.
Yeah.
And that was we partnered with the Knights to get that ultrasound machine.
Nice.
I think of Mary Shelter too in Fredericksburg. The work that they do,
So
and just there's an inherent love people have for helping women in a tough spot that have a baby to raise that baby, get education and so on, and get on their feet. That I think too has been another really cool development, as time has gone on and how it's evolved. How many folks are you expecting at the march this year, and how many were there last year?
So we don't do an official crowd count,
okay,
but we do some behind the scenes, look at different things, like some of the different major events. We know how many people attend them, and then we talk to WMATA, which is our, Metro, and get numbers on Metro compared to a regular Friday. And then we talk to the bus permitting people. So with all of that, we think, and this is a very conservative estimate, that we have right around 100,000 about every year. So
I have to think it's like 10 times, not 10 times that maybe, but hundreds of thousands. You go out on that mall, it's never that packed.
I hope that there are more, and it just seems to get bigger every year. It gets harder to get through the crowds every single year, but based on what we know and our data points, that seems
it's good
like
that you're conservative, so no one says that
we err on the side of
you're
caution.
pumping up the numbers, but
we certainly
I'm
are
skeptical.
not pumping up the numbers.
In a good direction.
Yeah.
Shifting gears a little bit, there are a lot of pro-life groups that are active in public policy and the grassroots, not just the March for Life, but National Right to Life, Susan B. Anthony, Students for Life, so on. What are some other ways that people can collaborate? So they come in for the march, or they can't make the march, let's say. But let's say they came in for the march, they're all hyped up, they're excited about it, and they do want to do more throughout the year. They don't want this to be the one thing. What do you recommend for the average parishioner that's looking to be a better advocate and have their voice, kind of lend their voice and their arms maybe to the effort? What should they do?
Gosh, there are so many aspects to that question that I'd love to drill down on. So first of all, when people come to the March for Life, our goal is that they go back changed and that they want to build a culture of life in their local community. And there are so many ways that they can do it. One very simple way is to get signed up just with our alert system, because we give different suggestions at least once a month, whether it's, contacting your member of Congress about a particular bill, or it's go see this movie and bring your friends to it that's coming out that's pro-life, or host a baby shower because this is, National Adoption Month, and can you please give all of the different gifts that come in for the baby shower to the local pregnancy center. So there are many, many ways. And what I would say is that each person is needed to build a culture of life. And so, I could go through, a bunch of things, praying in front of clinics, writing letters to the editor, considering running for public office or school board or some local, office, getting involved in your parish, being the pro-life chairperson in your parish. There are so many different ways. What I would recommend any listener do is pray. just say, Lord, how is it that you want me to serve? And then promise to say yes to the Lord, because I promise he'll answer. Because there's no lack of work to be done. And there are so many different ways to continue working on this at the local community. As for the different pro-life groups, one thing that's sometimes a little bit of a sadness, and this is very honest, is that I feel like the way the devil works, especially in the pro-life community, I saw it in abstinence education years ago, is divide and conquer.
Yeah.
And sometimes it seems like the groups can be a little bit competitive. We try really hard at the March for Life to not be that and to take the high road just as an organization. Not perfectly, but we sure try. And so I think it's very important. We work very much behind the scenes to draw unity in the movement. So one of the ways that we do that is at the March for Life, we invite all of the major pro-life leaders up, whatever organization they're in charge of. They are welcome to come on the stage at one point, and we read off the names of pro-life organizations that are working to build a culture of life. And that's kind of a big deal. I mean, nobody, gives us money for that or pays for the staging or their tents or anything like that. But it's really important to us to have that unifying moment. We also have a conference the day before the march, and we invite lots of different organizations in to give presentations and to be part of it. But I think it's something broadly as a movement we need to continue to work towards and pray for spiritual protection, because I think it's a way the devil can sometimes work as division.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. And the March for Life is a very unifying event. There's not, like you said, there's not a power play that's a part of it. It's just, let's show up in numbers and advocate publicly for what we believe in.
That's what we seek to do.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think I think you've done that very well.
Thank you.
Virginia was a little bit of a battleground, so to speak, last year, because there was a bill by my delegate, sadly, Kathy Tran, that was a borderline infanticide bill. She said on camera, and if that video wasn't out there, I don't know if it would have gone as far as it did, but said that she confirmed, yes, this would allow for abortion up to the moment of delivery, or even actually during delivery. Really horrifying. It brought people out of the woodwork from all over the country when they realized, wow, this is not the safe, legal, and rare mantra of yesteryear.
Right.
This is like an act of violence on a baby. People have a hard time sometimes understanding like a fetus, like first month or two as being a baby.
Yeah.
No one doubts that when it's at the moment of delivery, it's a baby.
Right.
And do you see states being a little more ambitious with regard to abortion legislation in the coming year or two? Do you see them as being less? Because most of our victories have been won legislatively at the state and local level. Federally, not much movement. But we've seen lots of victories at states. What do you see the next year or two looking like? Yeah,
I do. I think that we'll see, if I hate to use this language, but I think we'll continue to see extremes, Bill. So extreme on the other side. I'd say like on our side, we're always trying just to be protective of life. So what's extreme about that, right? But one good thing that came from that, if we can point towards one good thing, is that there was a great poll that came out. So, of course, in addition to Virginia, we also had New York passing this terrible law late January last year that enshrined a right to abortion and allowed abortion until birth, et cetera. And it was very much celebrated up there. And then, of course, the Virginia comment with Delegate Tran and the governor saying
comments,
the terrible, So we saw a Marist poll, and Marist is used by NBC, McClatchy, News Corps, so it's very mainstream. They're just a really sound, polling company. And they measured both New Yorkers and then nationwide public opinion on abortion and self-identifying as being pro-life or pro-choice in early January, and then they measured it again in late February. There was the largest change in the direction of life ever in the history of our country. So I take that to mean that Americans were appalled by some of these late-term abortion stances, both in Virginia and New York, and it worked. It backfired on them. It was an overreach for the other side, and Americans came out resoundingly in the side of life. So that's very interesting, because it's hard to change hearts and minds. That's a hard and lofty goal. But so what does that mean for the years ahead? Yeah, I think that we're going to see in Virginia, sadly, my state too, I think we're very quickly going to see the ERA passed. I think we're going to see delegate
Describe what that is so people don't know.
It's the Equal Rights Amendment, which really enshrines abortion rights. It's very bad for it. The name sounds so good. I mean, the name sounds like what the church teaches on women.
Yeah, we love equal rights.
But the bottom line is that it really, the rights are, really taking away the rights of the child, the unborn child. And then I think Delegate Tran will again reintroduce her bill with her infanticide bill. So I think we're going to see a lot of bad things in the Virginia State Assembly this year. And, that's unfortunate.
When that situation with Delegate Tran happened the first time, we were speaking regularly with the Virginia Catholic Conference, and they talked about the impact that social media played and the email campaign and phone calls. We provided the numbers for the legislators to tell them how you feel. And there was a lot from our diocese we knew because we could track, but we also know from outside the diocese there was a lot. And it reinforced the fact that while it doesn't feel like much to share an article about something and say, can you believe this? It doesn't feel like much to retweet the right tweets or to make a quick phone call or to send an email. It feels a little bit like it just evaporates into the ether.
Right.
If that's all you can do it. Because,
yes,
man, that carries weight. When you call the governor's office, it's a lot different if 3,000 people called just before you did.
I completely
agree. I'm talking about, the diocese. When we call to advocate to have something changed, if Jeff Caruso with the Virginia Catholic Conference calls up, it helps if they just got 1,000 emails from people in our diocese or from our state, considering Diocese of Richmond. It means a lot if they had just gotten bombarded with those emails. Yeah.
It does. We hear that at the federal level as well, so I would think it's all the more true at the state level. I mean, you really think sometimes, does this email or does this text or does this letter matter? Yes, it matters. It could be the one that is the deciding phone call.
Yeah.
It matters. And as Catholics, we are we're really called to do this. I mean, this is our way of, interacting with what's happening in our world, and we need to do our best to make it according to God's plan.
Yeah, and there are a lot of political issues out there, but the U.S. bishops just confirmed that abortion is the preeminent moral issue of our time, right?
They sure did.
It is critical. There is no real equal to it. We have to advocate on behalf of the unborn. They're obviously not just so vulnerable. There's no way to be more vulnerable than in the womb of your mother. And
the poorest of the poor, in the words of St. Teresa of Calcutta.
Right. If you're listening, vacatholic.org, you can sign up to get the alerts from the Virginia Catholic Conference. If this is an issue you care about, or any of the other issues for that matter, they create awareness to let you know what's going on. They tell you, hey, now's the time to call, now's the time to email. So you don't have to follow it all and be a master legislator or legislative analyst. vacatholic.org will get you signed up and make you more aware of what's going on there. There's a lot that happens around the March for Life. There's a lot of different events, different organizations and stuff. Is there a place that people can go to really be up to speed on what's happening when? So if they brought a bus of kids in from Florida and they're like, hey, we got some time, they can go find out maybe another place they can go or things that they could do to kind of further increase the experience for them.
Absolutely. Check us out at marchforlife.org. In fact, we just launched a new website last week. So, and for people who are coming in with young people on a bus, we've got pilgrimage packages. So we have ideas. So, go to the Holocaust Museum, make it a human dignity tour, basically, go to the different wonderful events hosted either by this diocese. Yeah, because it's really a pilgrimage. It really is a pilgrimage. And especially walking on the day of the March, historically that week is one of the coldest weeks of the year. Yeah. There are some sisters and brothers and priests that walk barefoot sometimes at the March, as sort of an act of penance. So it's a beautiful, if you are traveling in from out of town, we can just, delve into the richness of coming and all of this means about human dignity.
Yeah, it is a great week. I always feel like it's cold. It's like God's making you earn it.
I know.
If you're going to get the graces you're asking
I
for,
feel the same way.
He's kind of making you
Every 3 or 4 years, we'll get a blip. It'll be like 50 degrees and sunny or something. And it's like his way of keep it up, keep that spirit up.
So, but again, it's easy to march in the summer. It's not easy to march in the snows and the sleet of January. True. But Jeannie, thank you for what you do. You are on the front lines. You are fighting the good fight, and you're leading a lot of people, and you're doing work that a lot of people never see. And we know that, being this close to the city and having such a good relationship with you and the folks that you work with. But just know that we're grateful for that. And I would encourage everyone to listen. Please pray for Jeannie. Pray for her team. Pray for the March. Nice. It's so fundamental. And I think in the arc of history, hopefully my kids or grandkids, hopefully it'd be me, but at least my kids or grandkids, they'll remember those days when we had abortion, and they'll remember the pioneers that fought and brought it to its end. And I think your name will be included in that readout. So again, nice thank you so much. What's the March for Life website again?
marchforlife.org.
That should be easy. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's such an honor. Thank you, Billy.
You're listening to Searching for More. If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a review on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Also, make sure you follow the Diocese and the Arlington Catholic Herald on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And subscribe to our YouTube channels for regular videos that inspire, educate, and inform about the Catholic faith in our diocesan community.